quick announcements.
Venmo.
You were late on your delivery. Venmo is available. We have the thing over there. There's also a Venmo QR code on the website if you feel so led to give. Don't keep checking back at the website. We've updated a bunch of things. I've updated the Scripture 101 page with a few other things on there. Just periodically just check it and see what else is new. The Life of Yeshua series. There's a slight change in this series.
Oh, no.
We are not, because of some scheduling and some other things with some issues we ran into, we are not starting on the 6th. We're going to start on the 20th. And we're going to make it a little bit easier to make sure everybody can come and have the opportunity to not feel overwhelmed by it. What we're going to do, instead of doing it for 6 straight weeks, we're going to do it once a month on a Sunday. And do it for 6 months, which will put us into July. Take a couple months off for the summer. Then we'll start in the fall. We'll do the next set and do another series that way. I just felt like, other than the scheduling things we had, I just felt like I might be biting off more than I can chew. I was trying to do 6 weeks of that in a row, as well as the Torah studies and all that.
As was his wife.
And my wife was like, "Hey, why don't you just do it once a month?" I was like, as much as it behooves me to say yes, okay.
In the meantime.
As much time as I spent on the Torah studies, I was like, okay, maybe I should heed the counsel of my wife and do that. So that's what we're gonna do. We're starting it on the 20th. That is not the 2nd, but from then on, it'll be the second. It'll be the second Sunday of the month, and there'll be more details and registration online. I am going to go tomorrow and update all this. This has not been updated on the website yet, but I'm going to update that tomorrow. So you'll have that. One other announcement before we get into this. Darren helped me think. I knew there was something I wanted to add, and I couldn't remember what it was. We are planning. It's not planned yet, but we are planning a camping trip for Sukkot this year. It's not gonna. Some people like to go all out and do the full 7 days of Sukkot camping. I don't have time for that. So I do think it would be fun though to do a camping trip, at least 2 nights, where we can go. It'll probably be local. It's not going to be way off anywhere, and we'll have our campground set up. We'll have a big tent maybe in the center where we can do like Bible studies in the afternoons at night with campfire. I just think it would be really cool to do. So that's something we're going to start planning. So just be on the lookout for that, because I think it'll be awesome. And next week, you're not going to want to miss. There's a special surprise. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you are not going to want to miss next week. I'm just going to leave it there. Special surprise. Can't tell you what it is. Not telling you what it is.
Just don't tell us.
No, it's anticipation.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
I like Weaning.
Alright, so let's get into this week's Torah portion. My favorite book, Shemot. We are starting this week. And
Your favorite book, yeah. Your favorite book.
it is. It's my favorite book after Genesis, before Leviticus.
I thought it was Exodus.
It is.
We're on Exodus.
Shemot is
The Hebrew.
what the Hebrew name for the book is.
I knew
Because
it.
the first word, the first phrase is names. Okay? So we're going to be in Exodus chapter 1 through 5, basically. And then we're going to tie it in with verse 1 of chapter 6 on a little bit of a cliffhanger. As always, remember, if you have something to say, input, something you've seen when we're going through this, please speak up, raise your hand, shout it out, whatever you want to do. Okay? All right, let's jump right in. All right, we're going to recap on what we've studied so far in Genesis. Okay, so we went through Genesis. Now we're going to do this a little bit different. I want you guys to tell me what has happened in Genesis so far. What have we seen happen? Kind of recap on what we've had in Genesis leading up to this point.
Like the whole of Genesis?
Any part of Genesis. The whole book of Genesis. What's happened?
Joseph got sold by his brother.
Yep, that's happened.
God created the heavens and the
The
earth.
creation. We start there.
A lot of time has gone by.
A lot of time, yes.
The flood.
The flood.
Lost food.
A lot of generations.
Covenants with Abraham.
Lots of covenants of Abraham.
I don't know the.
Emma.
Working 7 years. daughters for Rachel.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
Oh, good.
very good detail.
He blessed Joseph's sons, but the younger one first.
Oh yeah, Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Very good.
Really tall people.
Famine happened. Really tall people.
Really tall people.
Really tall people. Giants in the land.
I miss giants.
Oh, you missed it? Yeah, no, I didn't hear for nothing.
Dad,
What?
David beating Goliath.
No,
That's not. We haven't covered that yet, but that is in the Bible. That's a very good one because he's a giant. All right, so that's a lot. So the one thing I want us to remember going into Exodus is when we were in Genesis, from Genesis 1 to where we're at now, a lot of time has taken place. A lot of time has taken place. But what you're going to notice as we go through the rest of the Torah, time kind of slows down. From the Exodus to all the way through Deuteronomy is not that much time, because it is. I don't know exactly. I have to look it up, but it covers pretty much. Okay, so how many people's lifespans have we seen so far?
A
A lot, right?
A lot, yeah.
Now we're about to jump into Moses' lifespan, and Moses is going to take us through the rest of the Torah. So we've got all these lifespans that have happened so far. Now the rest of the Torah, we're going to see one man's lifespan.
Wow.
So there's a lot that's about to happen in this short amount of time as we walk through this. So we got a lot of information to cover. So hang on, and we're gonna have fun with Exodus. All right, Exodus 1. Let's start there, and we'll see where Yah takes us. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. I messed you up on that because these aren't in the same order as the normal order. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. So now we got the genealogy, and now Joseph is gone. So let's talk about this phrase, that generation, because I want us to look at a couple of things here, because it's going to give us, as we're going through this first portion in Exodus especially, and really as we go through the Exodus story as a whole, I want us to really look for that reality of duality. There's going to be a lot of spiritual meaning in what we're reading. There's going to be a lot of things that we can look at and go, wow, that sounds very familiar to how things are today. Okay.
Langston.
So let's keep that in mind, and let's look at what that generation means. So let's look at the characteristics of that generation. Some of the characteristics of that generation. Who are we talking about with that generation? Yes, the 12 brothers, and the original 12. That generation was a nomadic generation. They grew up on the move. They were shepherds. They went in the area of the land of Canaan. They were constantly moving around to find pasture. And we see all the stories of where God took them on their journeys. So God said, hey, go to this place, go to this place. He's leading them to Canaan. They were taken care of by Yah. Yes?
Were most people then nomadic? Or a larger portion nomadic compared to now?
Compared to now?
Right, I mean, like, obviously there were cities and such, like, we see that.
It depends on I think it's the people, especially, like we'll talk about in a minute when we get to the Midianites. The Midianites, the Edomites, there was quite a few that were nomadic and moved around. Of course, you had, like, obviously we're going to see in the land of Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, they were pretty stationary. Babylon was pretty stationary. There was a lot of cities in Canaan that were pretty stationary.
Right. A lot more people lived in tents.
Well, they more or less, they had to move from location to location to get the food for their herds and all that. Where we have stores nowadays, we just down to
well, and as the seasons
moved around,
as the seasons changed, they would have had to move their flocks to better pastures, greener pastures.
Kind of migrated.
Yeah. So they grew up in the rough lands and struggled along the way. I mean, we've seen that so far in Genesis, how much a struggle they had when they were going to different places. They ran into cities that people that hated them, and so now compare that to this new generation. So now we've got the next generation that's come along. This generation is a settled people. We talked about that last week. That it said they settled in the land of Canaan, so they're not nomadic. They've found a place to settle. They've grown up in Egypt. I mean, by this point, now that Joseph's passed, a lot of time's passed. Who knows how many kids have already been born that know nothing but Egypt. They were taken care of by Egypt. I mean, think about the whole famine.
Yep.
The famine wiped them out. They had to be taken care of Egypt. Now Egypt owned all the land, all the cattle, all the people. They're giving them the grain that they can sow in the fields. So they're being taken care of by Egypt. And they had the choice land pick. I mean, they had the best of the best. They were given Goshen. So there's a stark contrast between the two generations here. So how long do you think it took for the next generation to become disconnected from what their parents and grandparents had to go through to get to that place?
Not long.
Not long at all.
It doesn't take
Because
us
we're
long.
disconnected
Exactly.
already. Yeah, like our grandparents did like World War II and the Great Depression and
No cell phones and no computers. And
completely.
The information
one
they
takes a single.
Exactly. How much easier would it have been for Pharaoh to slowly put them more and more into captivity because of this disconnect?
Oh, very.
I mean, the people that were there in the first generation were like, please take care of us. Yes, you're an amazing ruler. Take care of us. I mean, how much easier is it going to be now with this new generation that's all they know? They don't know a land before Pharaoh taking care of them.
That's what they were used to.
Yeah. And because of this, how quickly would they assimilate the Egyptian ways because they were constantly in the midst of it? So these are the questions to think about, especially as we're going through this, when you're like, man, how can that happen? Well, easily. And I put this, does any of this sound familiar?
Yeah, I said that to Gina.
Does this sound familiar? I mean, this is not America. I mean, I don't know what
Very
is.
much so.
You know. So keep this in mind as we continue through the next couple portions, when we're going to see the oppression, then we're going to see the deliverer, and then we're going to see them exit. There's going to be a lot of these questions to think about as we go through that. All right, let's continue on in Exodus. Verse 7, but the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. So it seems that they have dispersed outside of the land of Goshen into the whole of Egypt. Remember, and I said this earlier, but Egypt is a picture type of the world spiritually. Like when we think of Egypt, when we see things happening and characteristics of Egypt, we can easily associate that with what's happening in the world at large. And they were beginning to compromise and failing to be set apart because of this. They infiltrated the land. Exodus 23:32 through 33, we see this commandment of Yah given: make no covenant with them or with their gods. They must not dwell in your land and cause you to sin against me. For if you worship their gods, they will be a snare to you. We already see this taking place. It's no wonder once Yah got him out, he was like, here's one of the first ones. Don't mix with other nations, because this is what's going to happen, and they're already in the midst of it. Leviticus 18:1, Adonai said to Moses, speak to Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, and say to them, I am Adonai your God. You are not to act as they do in the land of Egypt, where you used to live, nor are you to act as they do in the land of Canaan, where I'm bringing you, nor are you to walk in their customs. Again, how long do you think they could be that connected to Egypt before they begin to act like the culture around them? This is going to play a huge part into what we see happen in the Exodus, when they get into the wilderness and Yah starts laying out his instructions for his covenant. This has grave, long-term consequences. There is a slow eroding of holiness that's taking place. And this is not something that happens quickly. This is a slow process. So we see the first step we saw last week when it said they settled in Egypt. So they were supposed to be set apart. We're sojourners. We're not staying here. And then it said they settled. And now it says they're scattering into Egypt. They're getting into the culture. They're getting into who's there. This is a slow process, and it will erode their set apartness, their holiness. So Ezekiel shines a little more light on the happenings of that time. And so we're going to read a little bit out of Ezekiel here real quick. Ezekiel 20. On the 10th day of the 5th month of the 7th year, some of the elders of Israel came to seek Adonai. They sat before me. The word of Adonai came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel. Say to them, Thus says Adonai Elohim, have you come to inquire of me? As I live, it is a declaration of Adonai. I will not be inquired of you. Will you judge them, son of man? Will you judge them? Make them know the detestable practices of their fathers. Say to them, Thus says Adonai Elohim, on the day I chose Israel, I lifted up my hand to the seed of the house of Jacob and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt. So he's talking about this, what's happening in the portion in Exodus. I lifted up my hand to them, saying, I am Adonai your God. On that day I lifted up my hand to them to bring them out of the land of Egypt into a land that I sought for them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all lands. I said to them, each of you must throw away every detestable thing from his eyes and not defile yourself with the idols of Egypt. I am your God. Where are the people at right now that he's talking about? They're in Egypt. This is happening now. This is not post-Exodus. This is pre-Exodus.
I know Ezekiel's referring to it?
Yes. Ezekiel's referencing. We're about to see some details of the happenings that we don't see in Exodus. But they rebelled against me and were unwilling to listen to me. None of them cast away the detestable things that were before their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. So I resolved to pour out my fury upon them, to expend my anger upon them. Where? In the midst of the land of Egypt. So this is before Moses leads them out. This is while they are in Egypt. Yah is saying, I showed up to them. I said, I'm their God. Do away with your idols. And they rebelled against me. So he said, okay, I've resolved to pour out my wrath upon who? Not the Egyptians. The Israelites.
Okay.
But I acted for the sake of my name. Remember that. When we're asking for things from Yah, one thing that I started doing is I'm like, for your name's sake. Will you do this for your name's sake? Will you do this for your name's sake? Because all through Scripture we see this, where he acted, Abraham said, don't do this for your name's sake. To keep it from being profaned in the eyes of the nations where they were, in whose sight I made myself known to them, to bring them out from the land of Egypt. So I led them out from the land of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. I gave them my laws and taught them my judgments, which if a man does, he will live by them. I also gave them my Sabbatot or Sabbaths as a sign between me and them, so that they would know that I am Adonai who made them holy. So Ezekiel tells us that God's anger and wrath actually burned towards Israel first. Then he heard their cry and turned his wrath towards Egypt to get them out and bring them out. So his strong hand could be turned. And if you keep reading the rest of chapter 20 of Ezekiel, is all about Israel's scattering and returning and the prophecy that's involved with that. And it's all centered around the Exodus story. So if you, on your own, go back and read the rest of chapter 20. It's pretty neat. I read the whole thing. I was like, where am I supposed to stop? I just picked 12.
Isn't that the one where it says keep Sabbath like 97 times?
There's a lot of them, yeah.
We were looking at that.
Oh, in Exodus?
No, in Ezekiel.
Oh, I don't know. I do remember in Exodus, or last year at one point, we were like, wow.
Yes.
Started counting.
There's a
because it
ton of
was a lot.
Sabbaths.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
was an Ezekiel chapter too. I wonder if it's this one.
Could be. And I just put this in there. It says, you can't hang out with leaven and not expect to get leaven into you. When we're getting ready to, in the Exodus story, we are getting ready to talk about the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread that happens. And that whole, I'll do a teaching when we get closer to Passover about that. But the idea is that leaven, a little bit of leaven, spoils the whole lump. And so you can't hang out with leaven and not get leaven inside of you. Kind of like a bad apple spoils the whole bunch. You know, same thing.
Veggie Tales and a bad apple.
That's right. Let's continue in Exodus. Verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And this verse right here is the pivot point for the entire story. So this word know here is yada. and it's close or intimate knowledge. And if we remember the lifespan of the Egyptians, because I always thought, how in the world could he not know Joseph? Because we think of the long years that we have recorded for all these Israelites. But if you remember, I talked about this last week, and I actually found some more information on this, which was pretty interesting. The study of the anthropological evidence, I think I said that word right, from several cemeteries, as well as the census declarations from Roman Egypt, to find the average life expectancy for males, Egyptians, at 22.5 to 25 years, and for females, 35 to 37 years. People in ancient Egypt did not grow very old, and I pulled all this from encyclopedias and stuff. Did not grow very old. Very high infant death rates due to high risk of infections resulted in an average age at death of 19 years. Jeez. For the wealthy, it was commonly believed to be 58 for women and 54 for men, while many of the aristocracy lived well over 65 years old. So due to lifespan differences, the new Pharaoh probably would have heard about Joseph, but not had a personal relationship with him. So we talked about this, I know, before, but I mean, Shem was still alive way down the line. I mean, there was like 10 generations that could still go back and talk to their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Where here, I mean, you're lucky at this age, I mean, you're lucky to even know your parents for that long.
I remember reading about Egyptians that they consumed an immense amount of bread. Like an immense amount of bread, like too much. That,
yeah.
Like when people died at like 20, 25, like their teeth were all rotted out. Like, and I think some of it had to do with the fact that, don't quote me on this, but they didn't eat a lot of meat. Like a lot, because they consider a lot of the animals secret. So
well, and I know too,
like
their sanitary stuff wasn't that great either. A lot of them wore wigs because they would shave their head because the lice and stuff was so bad in Egypt. That's why a lot of the pictures, you'll see, especially when they're portrayed in movies and stuff, they'll have shaved heads with like one little patch or something with hair, because they didn't keep their hair. They shaved it off so they could deal with like bug infestation.
Which is why when we get into the commandments that you're going to find that there's a lot of them that have to do with being sanitary. And it was like ancient, like God knew, like, hey, if you want to not get sick,
yeah,
do these things.
Yep.
You won't get diseases like the Egyptians.
So this shows how little time it takes to forget the root of the matter when you are disconnected from its source. When we get disconnected from, and think about how we can apply that to our lives. When we get disconnected from the source, how fast we forget the root of things. Verse 9, and he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. So I got thinking about this and I was like, how? But take these generations into account that their lifespans are shorter. The Egyptians are dying off way faster than they can multiply. I mean, they're basically just keep maintaining populations, most likely. Whereas it said that the Israelites are multiplying, flourishing. They're growing in numbers. Verse 10, come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. If we remember Joseph, we talked about Joseph was a wise king. And he was a kind ruler. Joseph saved them from the famine. Well, we got a new guy in charge now. But in the process, and I'll put this. So we know Joseph was kind, he was wise. But in the process, Joseph acquired all the money of Egypt. He acquired all the animals of Egypt. He acquired all the land in Egypt. He acquired all the people in Egypt. He gave them grain to sow with a 20% payback. Remember that from the last couple portions. Seems like a good deal for them to survive because Joe is a wise and kind ruler. But now there's a... Go ahead.
Did Joseph acquire them or he acquired them for Egypt?
Yes, this was it.
But they weren't his.
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yep. But now there's a problem. Verse 11, therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. And I think it's interesting because up until this point, we don't see anything that would trigger the Pharaoh to think these people could be a problem. There's not like, it doesn't seem like there's any kind of civil unrest, that would cause him to think this. So he's actually like just acting out of fear.
Right.
It's irrational fear because they haven't given him a reason.
Paranoid.
Yeah, exactly. Verse 12, but the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So I found this interesting. Historians conclude that the city of Ramses that we're talking about here had a population of about 300,000 people.
What?
So for Pharaoh to be concerned about Israel's numbers meant they must have been growing very numerous.
How many people are there in like Charlotte?
Population of Charlotte, North Carolina. 874,579. If I'm not mistaken, New Hanover County has like right at, or Wilmington is like, was 125.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Last time I checked, it's been a little while.
Just
It's probably
the
bigger
city
than
of Ramses had 300,000.
So 3 Wilmingtons, roughly. Three Wilmingtons. I mean,
Two, yeah.
it's a big city. So, obviously they were growing very, very numerous. Verse 13, so they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Siphrah and the other Puah. Where's Stephanie at? We need to hear her some more names. When you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. Which made me think, why just the males? If you're worried about them overtaking you, why not kill them all?
So because the males could,
The males could fight.
they could fight, but then also the females they could take as their wives and multiply.
So this is what came to my mind.
Yeah.
Jus prima noctis. Jus prima noctis. Which means the right of the first night. So historians have found evidence of this as early as 2000 BC, before the Exodus. So this would not have been an uncommon thing for the time. That this is the right for nobility to have any of the ladies of the land for their first night.
Oh, that crap.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you remember, like I always thought it was just part of the movie, but if you've seen Braveheart, there's the quote in Braveheart that says, if we can't get them out, we'll breed them out. So this is not scriptural, this is Daniel's thought, but this principle was found prior to the Exodus, as early as 2000 BC. So this most likely is what I think is why they didn't want to kill the females. So they said, okay, we can't get them out, we'll make more Egyptians with them. Just a thought. And this is basically what I said. If there were no males, the only way for the women to have children would be through Egyptian fathers. So verse 17, continuing on, but the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So this is like the first civil disobedience. They're like, nope. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this, and let the male children live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and gave birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. This isn't in my notes, but in some of the teachings that I've seen, the thought is that these midwives were not Hebrew, that they were Egyptian, that they had been set over the Hebrews to be their midwives, because one, why would he even think that a Hebrew would murder another Hebrew?
Right.
And two, why would a Hebrew have any clue as to how the Egyptian women had their babies? So in a lot of the midrashes, that's what they talk about, is that they were most likely either Egyptian, or they were some other sort of Semitic population that was there. They weren't Israelites, but they may not have been,
Right.
because the names fall more into that Hebrew
Some other type of
sound.
slave, maybe?
Yeah.
Slave.
Yeah. Verse 21, and because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. What's interesting is this casting into the Nile. The most likely, we'll look at this. So, Hapi, in ancient Egyptian religion, personification of the annual inundation of the Nile River. Hapi was the most important among numerous personifications of aspects of natural fertility, and his dominance increased during Egyptian history. This was the god of the Nile. Hapi was the god of the Nile. And so we see them casting the baby. Why would he tell everybody, hey, take the baby and cast it into the Nile? Why wouldn't he just, like he did the midwives, if you see the Egyptian males, or the Hebrew males, kill them? Why the Nile? Well, yeah, this was an act of sacrifice to their fertility god, in hopes they would become more fruitful and multiply greater than the Hebrews. So they're multiplying, we need to sacrifice to our fertility god so we can multiply.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't have anything to sacrifice. Why don't we just take their people so they don't multiply?
Exactly.
And then we'll
And
multiply.
this is going to be very, very... Remember this thought. Remember the Nile god. Remember this idea of sacrificing, because this is going to become important as we continue on in this portion.
Wouldn't the crocodiles just be babies?
Probably.
Or hippopotamuses.
Hippopotamuses. I mean, yeah.
There's a lot of big creatures in the Nile.
Oh, yeah. Any questions on chapter 1 before we continue on? The story has just begun, and it's just going to keep getting better. All right, let's go to Exodus chapter 2. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. I underline Levi. Just remember that as we continue on, because that plays a really important role into the fact that Moses is of the tribe of Levi. Once we get into the wilderness, we're going to see that. Verse 2, the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. Does anybody else have a different word in their translation other than a fine child?
I've heard handsome.
I've heard handsome child.
Hold on, let me. What translation? Beautiful.
Beautiful child, good child. There's quite a few translations. This word fine here is actually the Hebrew word tov, which means good. But it's a little bit more than good. Does anybody remember this word from our Genesis study?
Awesome.
God saw that it was good.
Yes, Genesis chapter 1. And Yah saw that it was tov. There's a lot more examples of tov, but that's the best one from the beginning.
My translation says delightful.
Delightful.
Yeah.
God saw. Well, we're going to see this in a little bit. So Isaac described Rebekah as tov. Pharaoh's dreams described the ears of good as tov. And tov can also be defined as beneficial. So when you look at this word in the Hebrew, one of the other good definitions for this is beneficial. So if we think about that, the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw him, she saw that he was beneficial. So
going back to creation, when we read it and it just says good, there's like so much.
Oh, so much. The word tov, good does not even, kind of like we talked about ra as evil.
Yeah.
Evil is such a bad translation of the word ra.
Yeah.
Tov, good is just a terrible, it's such a, our English words don't have enough words to describe tov. Because that's how amazing the word is. That's why I love the Hebrew language. Like, just doesn't connect.
That reminds me of watching like American Idol, the It Factor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They had that thing.
You've got it. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't know what it is,
What have you got?
but you've got it.
Yeah.
So, when she saw that he was beneficial, she hid him. So I believe this was a sign that she had prophetic insight into his destiny. It wasn't that he was just a good-looking child. I mean, think about it. When a baby's born, they're odd-looking creatures. You know, you gotta rub them, get the color in. I mean,
Speak for yourself.
so
Our babies are beautiful.
they were, but to look at a baby and think that it's beneficial, like God had to put something inside of her that was like this one, like he's got it. I don't know what it is, but he's got it. So continuing on, when she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. Yes?
So he hid the child for 40 years?
No. So when she couldn't hide him any longer, so he started to get older. And think about your little sister. Like when she was a little baby, you could hold her, shh, quiet, hide her. Once she got to where she could walk, do you think it was easy to hide her anymore? No. So as they get older, they start making more noise, So that's what happened. He started getting to the point where he was crying more, getting fussy, and she couldn't hide him anymore. So she had to figure out something to do. So we see here that she put him in a basket and put tar on the outside of it, which it says pitch here, so that it wouldn't get water inside of it. It made it waterproof, like a boat. So what's interesting, this word basket is the Hebrew word tebah. The Hebrew word tebah, and it's a unique word in that we see this. We've already seen this word before. We just maybe not recognized it. Genesis 6:13. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of flesh, for all the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself a tebah of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with what? Pitch. Same thing. So there's the symbolism here, right? Noah, pattern, that's right. Noah, God said, Noah, build a tebah and put pitch on it so that you're saved through the waters, the flood. Now we see Moses getting put in a tebah that's sealed with pitch and put into the waters.
Oh.
And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it up, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, This is one of the Hebrew children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. Wouldn't all you mothers love to have gotten paid just to take care of your children?
Your own child.
Your own child. She's getting paid to take care of her own child. She thought she had lost him, and now she gets paid to take care of him. How about that?
Oh my gosh, I just thought my pretzel did.
When the children grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. So why would she take a Hebrew as her own son? I mean, the fact that the slaves,
Because
a child of the slaves, do what? She thought he was beneficial too. She's like, maybe she did. That's good.
Maybe she couldn't have children.
Yeah.
Maybe she was.
So what did we talk about earlier?
The Nile.
The Nile. They would have seen this as a sign from the gods.
Yeah.
They're throwing all these babies into the Nile,
And now
but this one,
Came out.
this must be it. He must have it. He must be. This one's beneficial. This must be from the gods. Has to be.
Did she already have a kid, Ramses?
No.
No, that's just.
That
in
would
the
have been
movie.
Pharaoh's son. That would have been her brother.
That was Hollywood just
Yeah.
going.
In the movie The Prince of Egypt, when it shows Moses and Ramses being brothers, it's actually not biblically accurate. It made for a good story.
Cousins or something.
Yeah, it made for a good story.
Uncle, nephew.
It would have been his uncle, yeah. Ramses would have been his uncle. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked upon their burdens and saw the Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. I always wondered about this, and I didn't notice it till this portion, that it says he went out to his people.
Yeah.
So he knew he was a Hebrew, and he knew...
Did they know?
Yeah. What?
So I have a
Yeah.
theory.
You have a theory. I love theories.
Okay, so
What's that
Erica can
theory,
attest to
please?
this. Babies would not have been weaned until they were 3, 4,
Yeah.
5, 6
7
sometimes.
sometimes.
And, yes.
And so that means that mama could pour
Oh, a lot of people
all
went
of
to it.
So,
It is.
I didn't have time to put it into here, but I actually did a little bit of research on ancient weaning times.
Yep.
And some of the Egyptian culture, like more what they would consider advanced cultures, were like 2.5. But some of the more nomadic were anywhere from 2.5 to 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. So when the Bible talks about train up a child, and then from modern studies we know that most children have 95% of their identity by the time they're 5. So there's a lot that this mother, that's probably all she did. Was like, read the Torah to him, tell him the stories of their fathers, their
Well,
forefathers.
there wasn't Torah yet. He hadn't written it.
Well, that's what I'm
So
saying. Like,
he told
well,
him Torah.
they would have passed down
Right.
all the stuff.
Oral,
yeah.
yeah.
The oral Torah. They would have passed all that down, which is something that the Egyptians didn't have. They didn't have the genealogy to be able to do that. But yeah, so it's interesting that he knew that those were his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? He answered, who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely the thing is known. So he's like, oh no. What I thought was hidden is not hidden. How many times have we ever dealt with that in our life?
Me.
Verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But again, Prince of Egypt story, way off track. Pharaoh's trying to kill this joker. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. I underline that just because it's interesting. There's so much symbolism with the well. I mean, how many of the fathers we read in Genesis met their wives at wells? Right. Jesus winds up meeting the Samaritan woman at the well. Right. The well, we talked about, represents the knowledge of Torah. So, I mean, there's so much going on here. We could probably spend like 10 hours talking about this portion.
We should do a teaching on wells.
Yes.
Well,
Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs of water their father's flocks. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. When they came home to their father Reuel, he said, how is it that you have come home so soon today? They said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. And the name Gershom actually means refuge, or refugee, I'm sorry. Means refugee, so it's kind of fitting.
So even Moses was a sojourner.
Yes. Everybody's.
That pattern.
Well, he was technically a sojourner in Egypt.
Right, yeah.
Now he's going to be a sojourner in Midian. He's a refugee because he fled Egypt. During those many days, so time has passed. Key phrase there. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. We talked about this word knew here is that same word yada. It's having that personal connection with them.
Is that like the yada 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 from
Probably. Maybe, I don't know.
Actually,
that could be Yiddish from that.
But yeah.
So any questions on chapter 2?
No, thank you.
That's where we're at so far. This is...
How are we doing on time, babe?
Oh, we're fine.
I meant like for the kids.
We're fine.
I want to leave.
7:40.
No.
All right.
You're planning
Let's continue on. Exodus 3. Because now the story is about to get even.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see the great sight, while the bush is not burned. Interesting, this phrase, turn aside, in Hebrew is sur. And it means to turn out of one's current course or to be removed from lifeless things. So I thought it's interesting that something caught Moses' eye that changed his course. I could preach on Sunday morning with this. And he was removed from lifeless things.
That's good.
Think about, he's a shepherd. His entire day is probably just watching these stupid sheep. Let's go. You know what? And now he's being pulled out of that, out of lifeless things. Yes.
Next thing was raising his hand.
Oh, thank you. Question.
So isn't Mount Horeb like Mount Sinai?
Yes, we're going to see that.
So he was there twice.
Oh, there's lots of things that have been happening on Mount Horeb. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like the burning bush, and then the people were like,
Which is
no, you talk to.
Exactly. Well, which is interesting because we remember in Genesis, there was quite a few times where they referred to God as El Shaddai, and we talked about that one of the meanings of that can be Yah of the mountain. And we're seeing Mount Horeb, we're going to see Mount Sinai. Absolutely. Good observation, Langston. Verse 4. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside, Sur, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. And this is the verse that came to my mind when I read this. James 4:8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Yah waited for Moses to draw near before he called them. So Moses saw the thing, he changed his course, drew near to it, and then Yah called to him. Patterns. Think about that in your own life. What course are you on? Is something can Yah draw you off of that course so that you will get closer to him so that then he can call out to you? Then he said, Do not come near, take your sandals off of your feet, for the place which you are standing is holy ground. So why did Moses need to take off his sandals? Yeah, so first off, it was obedience. God said so. Right?
A bush is talking, I imagine you listen.
Yes. 2, a sign of respect. Taking your shoes off in that time was a sign of respect. A lot of times they would take their shoes off at the door before they went into a house and washed their feet.
Yeah,
Sign of respect for the house. But also, I thought of this. Sandals were man-made and were a barrier. They created a barrier between Moses and the holiness of that place. And we're going to see later on as we get into Leviticus, I think it is, where God gives instructions of how to build altars. And you are not allowed to use a man-made tool to cut the stone. They had to be made.
Stone as it was, right?
They had to use the stone because nothing man-made should be able to touch something that was going to be that holy. So this is kind of a principle that he's setting in place.
He was grounding.
He's grounding. Ancient grounding. So let's just take a second to talk about holiness, because God said the place you're standing is holy ground. So the word holy, and I actually have, if you want the Cliff Notes, you can go to the YouTube channel. I have a defining the terms holy on the YouTube channel. I did a little short video on this. So this word holy, kadesh, is a noun, and it is set apartness or sacredness. It is from the word kadash, which is the verb form of that, and it means to sanctify, set apart, or cleanse. But all of this is connected to the word kadosh, which is the adjective form of this. And one, it means of Yah, it's separate, set apartness, and therefore called holy. Of man and places, it means being set apart. So in all of these forms of holy, we see a decision made that creates the opportunity to be set apart. So you get to make the decision to be set apart. Being holy doesn't start with Yah. It starts with you. That's why later on we're going to see where Yah tells them, tell the children of Israel, sanctify themselves. Separate themselves. So you get the choice to set yourself apart. You get the choice to figure out what you're going to do that makes you different than Egypt. This is what the children of Israel didn't do. They said, "Oh, I'm just gonna hang out with them just for a little bit. I'm just gonna go hang out with them for a little bit. It's nothing big." Then next thing you know, they're living among them, not in the land of Goshen, not being set apart.
Manny.
I feel another whole sermon coming.
This is I'm telling this.
Hey, you were asking what you should teach about. Holiness.
Yes. So I stopped at 59 slides. There's so much more stuff I could have added to this. I was like, I don't have time.
That whole set apart.
Yes.
The
whole thing.
Yes.
We think that this idea of holiness is about Yah making something holy. It is about us setting ourselves apart. It's about the choices that we make that distinguish us from the rest of the world. That's why the Bible says the road is narrow, the gate is narrow, that leads to everlasting. Like, it's a narrow road. It's a narrow road. So you get to make the choice. Are you gonna walk the wide path with everybody else, or are you gonna set yourself apart? But what's really cool is that when you set yourself apart, then you give Yah the opportunity to set you apart in what He does. Verse 6, and He said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And he said, I am the God of your wrong thing. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering. And have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So who are his people? Children of Israel. Okay, just make sure we're clear on that. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? These are the kinds of people Yah chooses. The most unlikely people.
Yep.
Not the people that are like, ooh, put me first. I want to be up on the stage. Not, put me first. I'll lead. He doesn't even want it. Like, he's like, no. I don't want this. Give it to somebody else. And we're going to see how many times he tells God no. he tells God no so many times. God finally is like, I've had enough. Like, hush, you were the one I'm picking. Get over it. Get your butt in gear and go. He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt. You shall serve God on this mountain. And we're going to see later in the story, this mountain is going to wind up being where God meets them as we continue on in Exodus. And I underline this word sign. If you remember, this word sign is the Aleph, Vav, Tav. It's the nailed Aleph, Tav. It's the picture type of Yeshua as the sign.
Aleph, Tav.
Is that the same mountain that Jacob had his dream and all of that?
This is Mount Horeb. Yeah, this is the mountain that will wind up being where the temple is built, house of God. So it's awesome.
What?
So many things there.
What do you mean?
And then let's go.
I'm confused.
What?
You said where the temple's built.
Where eventually she was asking about Jacob's dream and all that. where he anointed the stone.
When is it built there?
What?
The temple.
So in Jerusalem. Yeah.
That's not where Mount Horeb is.
That's where about. I could be. This is the same mountain that.
Because there's like two things before
So
that.
yeah,
Like
in Genesis,
Abraham met him on the
Jacob
mountain.
and they.
Yes.
But they like leave. Horeb's like way down here, and Jerusalem's.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I just was confused.
yes. I could have misspoken there. I apologize. Do you have your hand up for a question? Or? Yes.
Could you still like go visit that mountain?
Mount Horeb. If you knew where it was at, probably.
Probably. I would.
I imagine archaeologists have they've pinpointed most mountains. I imagine they know where that's at.
You just have to. It would have to depend on the government that's ruling that area now.
There's a lot of places that governments have control on that they're like, nope, you can't come here.
So like where they pretty sure they know where the ark is, but you can't get there because it's in like the
Turkey.
middle of
Turkey.
like.
It's like on the
Yeah.
border of Turkey,
In
and like
Afghanistan.
there's all kinds of countries that
Yeah.
have like crazy control over it.
I just saw something about that the other day that's saying that wasn't it, but
Either way, they're
Yeah.
not gonna let you just come
Yeah.
strolling in there.
Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say to the people of Israel, I am has sent you. So this phrase I am is translated I exist because I exist. But actually, if you look at the grammar of the Hebrew, it actually should be better translated, I will be what I have always been.
I like that.
Which ties into the whole God is the same yesterday, today, forever. Say, I will be today what I have always been and what I always will be. Now, when I was watching one of my teachers that I like to listen to this week, he pointed out something interesting, and I was like, this is too good not to show. So we know the name of Yah is Yod He Vav He. So it's Yod, a Vav, and a He. That's the three letters that make up that. Well, if you take those three letters, the Hebrew word for he was He Yod He. He is He Vav He. And he will be is Yod He. So all the letters that make up Yah's name also make up the phrase he was, he is, he will be. I was like, that is amazing.
Here's Mount Horeb.
Oh, did you find it?
It's really cool looking.
If it wouldn't mess it up, I'd tell you to throw it to the screen real quick.
I'm trying to find one that'll let me pull it up. Big. Yep. There it is.
Whoa! That's cool. There's Mount Horeb.
Whoa.
It looks like the one they use in the Ten Commandments.
It does.
They probably
It does.
did.
They could have actually used Mount
That
Horeb.
looks like them. Yeah.
That is cool. So God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. Yah, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. So somebody please tell me why the King James Bible decided to take it out over 6,000 times. When he clearly says, this is my name, remember it forever.
What did it name?
Yod He Vav He. So, we say Yah. Some people would say that you pronounce it Yahovah. I say Yahweh. So just to make everybody happy, I say Yah. Almost all of them have the beginning Yah. So Yah.
By the way, Mount Horeb's in
Yahweh.
Saudi Arabia.
Oh, Yod. So the letters are Yod, He, Vav, He. Yep.
Yod He Vav.
Yod, He, Vav, He. Yep.
Yod
Yod, He, Vav, He.
Hey Vav. Hey.
Yep.
Yo, hey, yeah.
It took me like
I wrote that.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you guys remember that? My children.
I do.
remember. I go around the house being like, habadoo, badoo. What?
Yabba dabba
Yabba-dabba-doo. I don't know what it
That's
says.
funny. Yah. We'll just say Yah. Yah. Verse 16, go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord. I underline here, you and the elders of Israel. I don't think I've ever noticed that before. I always just thought it was Moses and Aaron that went to Pharaoh. But he went with all the elders of Israel. So he was rolling 12 deep. Because there would have been an elder for every tribe. So, yeah. And so I just thought that was interesting. But I know the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. And remember, we have to remember, Pharaoh of that day thought he was a god. They were thought of as incarnate beings. Like it was like their way of perverting the idea of Yeshua coming and being God in the flesh. Pharaoh thought he was the incarnate of a god. So that's why he's saying, like, he's not going to go unless there's a mighty hand that comes and forces this. He's letting him know ahead of time what's going to happen. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go. And I love the fact that he uses the word wonders. I just think it's such a cool word that he put there. He's like, I'm going to strike Egypt and show them all of my wonders. Like, so many different words he could have used, but the fact that he used the word wonders, just neat. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold and jewelry, and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. You shall plunder the Egyptians. Any questions on chapter 3?
They're going to rob the Egyptians?
No. Look.
Oh.
Yeah.
And they're just going to give it over?
Yeah. They're going to be like, we don't care.
Like,
Take it. Take it. Go. I don't care. What do you want? You want the TV too? Take it. Just go. Take the TV. I don't care. Take the lawnmower. Whatever. Just take
See
it.
what happens. You'll see. They'll be.
Yes.
Take whatever you want.
Yeah. By the time it gets to the point where they're leaving, they're like, please go. Please go. All these wonders that we think are cool because they're wonders. I don't think Egyptians thought they were wonders. They didn't think they were wonders. All right, Exodus chapter 4. Here we go. Verse 1. Then Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. John 4:48. This brought this scripture to my mind. John 4:48. Then Yeshua said to him, unless you all see signs and wonders, you'll never believe. The Lord said to him, what is in your hand? He said, a staff. This word staff is the Hebrew word mateh, and it means staff, rod, branch. But it can also mean tribe, which is interesting that it's used to talk about the tribes of Israel. And this made me think of this, Psalms 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me.
So rod and staff is the same thing.
Rod and staff.
He said the same thing.
They're actually different words in Hebrew. One day I'll do a teaching on that too.
Yeah.
And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. This word serpent in Hebrew, I love these words. These are just great words. This word serpent in Hebrew is nachash. Does anybody remember where that word came from? Nachash is the same word for the serpent in the garden.
The one that we
Yeah.
hypothesized was also cherubim.
Yes. Just saying.
Does
So,
that make you go?
study this word out a little bit more. I'm not going to go into depth on this, but it's interesting that this word nachash is the word that is used as the serpent in the garden, and is now used to say what his staff turned into. Interesting things here. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So I underline this because logically that doesn't make sense. If you're going to catch a snake, you don't grab it by the tail.
Right.
You grab it by the head.
Unless you're Steve Irwin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if you want to catch it, like if you can hold on to it by the tail, but if you want to like pick it up and handle it, you're not going to try to catch it by the tail. Like you're going to grab it by the head. So I thought that was interesting. Put it in his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Who are they?
The Egyptians.
The Israelites. I have never caught this before. Because earlier it said, well, they won't believe me. And he said, here's a sign to show them. That they may believe, the Israelites, because here, that they got of their fathers. So this is clearly, he's talking about the Israelite leaders.
Well, because they're not going to just believe some guy coming in talking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. So again, we talked about this, but these are all signs, right? We talked about this. These are signs. This word sign is the nailed Aleph Tav. It's the sign, the symbol. It's symbolic of Yeshua. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." What does this even mean?
Like he stutters?
Possibly.
Yeah,
I think I'm gonna show you some other verses that talk about this, though. And I think we'll get a little bit better picture of what he's talking about here. So in next week's portion, we're going to read this. So Exodus 6:28. So it happened on that day when Adonai spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt that Adonai said to him, Moses, I am Adonai. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything that I tell you. But Moses said to Adonai, I am of uncircumcised lips. So how would Pharaoh listen to me? This scripture came to my mind. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a glowing coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs of the altar. He touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away and your sins atoned for. This idea of uncircumcised lips, this word uncircumcised actually symbolizes being covered. So there's like a covering that hasn't taken place. And this word uncircumcised also deals very much so with being set apart and being in covenant with Yah. So he's saying, oh, no, I can't. My lips aren't pure. They're not clean. He's like, well, I'm not giving you an excuse. So back to Exodus 4. Then the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? I wouldn't want to be in the position to have the Lord say that to me.
I would be like, yeah, I want to.
And that reminded me of Job. Where were you? This is the whole argument. Job's arguing with God, right? The dumbest thing in the world. Like, what? Why? Job's arguing with God. And he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who set its dimensions, if you know? Or who stretched a line over it? On what were its foundations set? Or who laid the cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Don't argue with God. Don't try to give him an excuse. So verse 12 of Exodus. Now therefore go, and I will be your mouth, and teach you what you shall speak. End of story, right? No. But he said, Oh my Lord, please send someone else. Still.
That would literally be me.
Yeah. Like, come on.
Like, please.
Come on.
There, he can do it. No.
Come on.
Anybody.
Please. He just, if God, who makes man's mouth? I'd be like, okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Nah, he just keeps arguing away.
But I don't want to.
So what happens? Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. So before he was like, it's like your kids, you're like, look, when you say that one last,
One more again.
you say it one more time. Say it one more time. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron your brother the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart." Which, I didn't put this on my notes, but it's interesting that God has already orchestrated Aaron's journey.
Right.
And this hasn't even happened yet. Like, he knew what Moses was going to say, so he said, let me go ahead and... Aaron, go ahead and start your journey, because he's about to say something dumb. I'm going to need you to go out there and help him. Verse 15, "You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be your mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him." Now let's make sure we're clear. Moses was not God. God isn't saying Moses is God. This word here, though, when he says you shall be as God to him, it actually is Elohim. And we always think of, most of the time, Elohim is just referring, when we see it in Scripture, it's just referring to Yah. But the word Elohim means gods, little gods. It means judge. And it also means ruler. It is the idea is that it is a magistrate with delegated authority. So he's saying, look, he's going to be your mouth, but you're going to be the delegated authority over him. So you're going to control the situation. He's going to talk.
Kind of like an apostle.
Very much. So this is very much a picture type that Moses is the picture type of an apostle, and Aaron is the picture type of a prophet. Because what is a prophet? It's the mouth of God.
The mouthpiece, yeah.
He hears, he speaks. That's what a prophet does. The apostle is he's going to be the authority over it all. "And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs." Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses and Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who are seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons, and had them ride on a donkey, and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go." Interesting. Interesting.
That is interesting.
Because if his heart isn't hardened, then God's not going to get to show off all of his wonders. Remember he said, they're going to see all my wonders. And as we get into next week and the following week, when we actually see these play out, we're going to see the reason for this statement. We're going to see what needed to happen for them to leave Egypt.
At this point, it seems kind of pointless.
Yeah. And it is building to this grand finale that's going to take place. It's going to be the final straw that God is going to use to bring judgment into Egypt. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to be awesome. "Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son.'" And then this story kind of takes this weird 3-verse twist. "At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, 'Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me.' So he left him alone. It was then that she said, 'a bridegroom of blood,' because of the circumcision." So let's go back and look at this a little bit.
Yeah, it's odd.
"At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death." Who is him?
Moses.
So there's a couple trains of thoughts here.
Yeah, I went digging on that, and I came to Moses. But
So there's a couple trains of thought. One, God has just appointed Moses to do all of this miraculous stuff. And now he's going to turn around and kill him? Because of his son's uncircumcision. Who's the uncircumcised?
The Son.
So who's in violation of the covenant?
The Son.
The Son. So there's one train of thought that says this is most likely the Son. That God has turned His anger towards the Son because the Son is not circumcised. Even though it's
Shouldn't it be
Moses, it's Moses' fault, but Moses isn't the uncircumcised. So it's just a train of
How do
thought.
we know Moses isn't uncircumcised? He was raised as an
So-
Egyptian.
Because he would have been in a Hebrew home on the 8th day is when circumcision took place. So he would have been raised. He was home up until the weaning.
Yeah.
So he was definitely circumcised. So then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." This word here, to cut off, is watikrot in Hebrew. I'm probably saying that absolutely wrong. But it means to cut off, but it also means to make. So when you look at Hebrew, a lot of times words can be negative words, they can be positive words. It depends on the context in which they're put. So we see this word can mean to make, but the main time it's used in Scripture means to cut off. This comes from the root word karat, which means to cut down. And this word really infers the act of a covenant. So this shows that she cut off her son's foreskin. So this is the act of the covenant that needs to take place. Then in verse 26, so he let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. This last phrase, because of the circumcision, in Hebrew is lamulat, and it is a noun. And this is the only time in Scripture that the idea of circumcision is put in a noun. All other times when it talks about circumcision, it is the verb. It is the act. It's the act of it. So it's interesting that this is the only time that it occurs in Scripture where it is set as the noun. So this whole thing, as strange as it is, one, we see Moses has not taken the responsibility of the father to circumcise his son.
Did both sons or just one? Because earlier it says he took his sons.
Again, train of thought, we don't know, is that it was the second son. But again, that's just in the midrashes they talk about that it was probably the second son.
Probably in another book.
Probably. So, but this idea of circumcision is again, it's the idea of covering, and it's the idea of there's an act that hasn't taken place that's supposed to take place, and the word cut off. Oh, let me back up. I went too fast. No, stop it. This word cut off is the same word in Hebrew that talks about the children of Israel. If they don't obey the covenant, they will be karath. They will be cut off. So we see a lot of the symbolism of how the circumcision is tied to the covenant. And then we also see that in the act of circumcision, that the foreskin was then thrown onto the ground. So you cut off, you set yourself apart, and then that thing that dies gets buried in the ground. So your sin nature is buried. So there's a lot of interesting symbolism. There's not a lot of good details. Kind of like the whole Judah and Tamar thing. Like, you're like, what? There's a lot of speculation of what is. There's a lot of midrashes that talk about these ideas. But there's nothing that's like, in Scripture it says this.
Right, yeah. Some things you're... It seems to be a kind of a constant pattern that the Lord's like, well, that detail's not important.
Yeah. But the biggest thing in this whole little 3-verse story is that we see the wife, the mother, the woman stepping up to do what the man should have already done. Which is interesting.
It feels like, well, with the English punctuation, that she's in a mood about it.
Oh, I'm sure she's in a mood. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the midrashes they say that. She was just in a bad mood, and she was going to let Moses do. There's actually...
Everybody okay?
Hooray! My kids aren't back there.
What was that?
I don't know. Those had to have been the bigger ones. Nobody's crying, nobody's running.
Nope. Nobody's crying.
So, and actually, there's actually a Jewish tradition, I'll say, in some of the other like midrashes and writings that say that it was at this point that Moses sent her back home and went on with just Aaron to for the rest of the journey.
Because I didn't think she was there the whole time.
Mm-mm. So let's continue on. Now that we're so confused about what those 3 verses mean, let's just keep going. We'll just forget it. Let's just keep going.
My notes on that. What?
What? Yeah, what?
I said why.
Verse 27, the Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and did signs in the sight of the people. So now he's now what God told him to do, he's now playing that out. He's throwing down his staff and showing them the serpent. He's doing his little cloak thing. His little parlor tricks, if you would. You know, little...
Well, it seems to me that there's like a pattern of when you need to believe that they're legitimate, that Yah opens up the door for them to do signs and wonders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is Aaron doing the signs?
No, this is Moses.
Aaron spoke the words and Moses did
Yes.
the things.
And this is interesting because when we
Well,
get...
here, no, look at that. Aaron
What is it?
spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and did the signs in the sight of the people.
Yeah.
Homework.
have to look at that because this is what Moses is supposed to be doing. Now, when we get to Pharaoh, it specifically says Moses told Aaron to throw down his rod.
So maybe they both get a chance to show that they're chosen. Because we don't know. It doesn't tell us how Aaron knew, hey, I'm going to go visit my brother out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
That reads to me like Aaron's doing it.
What it'd be interesting to read some different translations and see how they translate it, see if it says the same thing. Because there's always sometimes stuff that's lost in translation. I didn't even notice that. That's a good
Good find.
Good find. 31, and the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, and they had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped. Any questions to chapter 4? Other than the 3 verses. We're not talking about the 3 verses.
No, of that. Well, who did it? Aaron or Moses? That's. You have to go study that.
Yeah.
Well, I took some notes on the signs.
Yeah.
That I thought were really interesting. So, if we have time, I will talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the serpent sign, where he threw the rod and it was a serpent and then he picked it back up. I said the serpent is an Egyptian power symbol and it represents the cobra goddess.
Oh yeah.
And for him to, like, here's your cobra goddess and then pick it up and have power over it would have been a good symbol to them that Yah was going to have power over this Egyptian.
Whoever he's with is stronger than who they've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the skin disease one seemed like to me putting the hand in and then it's leprous is like, because that usually skin disease is usually indicative of like an inward sin condition. Well, that's how they thought. And then when you bring it back out and it's clean, it's like symbolic of God bringing you out and cleaning you up.
Cool.
And then the Nile is back to the baby thing. Like it would, when they take the water out and put it down in its blood, it would be like the blood of their babies, like showing them God saw this and there's going to be vengeance for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Oh yeah.
I thought all that was fascinating.
That is awesome.
Manny's impressed.
Oh, you like that, Manny?
So the Berean Study Bible says, and Aaron relayed everything the Lord had said to Moses, and Moses performed the signs before the people.
That's what the Amplified says.
There's a couple of different, the New Living Translation says Moses did it. Amplified says Moses did it.
And then we say
What does the actual Hebrew say?
Yeah. That's
Well, the Hebrew is hard to. So the problem
They
is,
don't have all the words.
yeah, the problem is the Hebrew has a lot of missed words.
The movie said that Moses did it.
But a lot of them just say "and did the signs."
Yep.
So it could be either way. Yeah. The sorry, I was looking at while she was. Where's that? There it is. It just most of it just says "and he," so it's hard to.
Which he are we talking
Yeah.
about?
So is it referring to Yahweh said to Moses and Moses, or Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron? So there's a lot of I'd have to do some digging in the midrashes and see what I could find about that. All right, let me get this pulled back up. If it will let me, there we go. All right. Any more questions on 4 before we go to 5? Last chapter. Round it out. Love it. All right. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." I thought this was absolutely interesting.
Feast.
We like feast. We love them.
That they may hold a feast. Wait a second. The feast hasn't come yet. God hasn't given them the feast. Yes, He has.
They already
The
knew
feast.
what
They already
were.
knew what the feasts were.
They just didn't have it written
So-
down yet.
They just didn't. Yeah. They knew some of these feasts.
So timeline wise, which one do we think it is?
So
What did they say?
Michael teaches that this is most likely Sukkot because of the timeline. So there would have had to been a large span of time for all the plagues to take place.
Right.
The plagues, like most of the movies, different things. It's just like one day. No. These took time because there was harvests that were involved. They got damaged. There's a lot of
Was it
things.
probably a year?
Different people say different things. Some people say more than a year. Other people say less than a year.
Within spring to fall.
Yeah, fall to spring
Yeah.
Okay.
because Passover's in spring.
So he destroyed both harvest seasons.
Yeah. Well.
Because they
Yes.
had barley in spring.
Yeah.
And wheat in fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it says something about that in one of the.
It does.
Bibles.
Yep.
Reading it. Yeah.
So yes. So I just thought that was cool that it actually says feast there. I was like, They want to go out and hold a feast. And if I'm not mistaken, this is in my notes, so don't quote me on this, but this word for feast here is actually the same word that's used to describe the 3 pilgrimage feasts, where they required the men to travel for the feast. So Hagag, that's what it is. Yep. So it's used to symbolize the pilgrimage feast, which is interesting. All right, verse 2. But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord?" This is Yah. So Moses says, "Thus says," this word says the Lord. Thus says Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. This is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The God, the Elohim of Israel. Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me. So Pharaoh says, "Who is Yahweh, that I should obey His voice and let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." You got to think.
That reads so different that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
When you read that, so I'm going to try to interject all the Yahwehs because
Scripture,
yes.
that translation, maybe use that next
Well,
time.
I'll
so we
just
can start seeing
I
them.
can insert it too, just verbally, but yes. So Pharaoh, the Egyptians venerate many gods. So Pharaoh, to say that there's another god would not have thrown Pharaoh off.
Be like, okay.
Like he'd be like, okay, yeah, who is this one? I don't know this one. This is not Ra. This is not. What was the other one we talked about? Hoppy. This isn't. Who is this Yahweh? I don't know this name. Who is that? He's like, I don't know him. I'm not letting him go. I've done very, very well with the gods I have. Why should I listen to this one? Then they said, "The Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to Yahweh, our Elohim, lest He fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword."
It reads so much better that way.
But the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why do you take the people away from their work?" Because he's got all the elders with him. Remember, he's got people with him. "Get back to your burdens." He's like, these guys got work to do. Why are you wasting their time? They're not going to meet their quota today because you got all these people with you. Get them back to work.
Did God say to say that about pestilence or sword?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, they added that.
They got
So,
nervous.
They were like, oh, maybe he won't just listen to us if we just say God tells us to do this. Maybe we should say we're going to get destroyed with other stuff. They just went through a famine. Maybe we can use that as a tool against them.
What are they sacrificing?
Ooh, you'll find out.
Don't have people or anything weird.
No.
There's animal spoilers.
Yeah, that's a spoiler alert. I can't tell you that. And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land are now many, and you make them rest from their burdens. I hate to give them a time of rest.
Give them a day off.
Then, or the same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their foremen, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, as in the past. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But the number of bricks that they made in the past, you shall impose on them. You shall by no means reduce it, for they are idle. Therefore they cry, let us go and offer sacrifice to our God. So he's like, look, the only reason they're saying this is because they're lazy. So how about let's make them work harder? But they still got to make the same bricks. But now, we're not going to bring them straw. They got to go get their own straw. But they still have to keep their same bricks. And what was interesting is that historically, they've actually found archaeological sites in this area where the buildings, the lower bricks, are stronger and have more straw content. And as the wall gets higher, the bricks get weaker because they have less straw in the... I was like, that's cool.
Same thing happens today in workforce. you make a goal, your sales goal. They want you to do it. You want to beat it next year.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I busted my butt to do it this year.
Yeah.
You want me to do better. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So,
And then you have to make sacrifices
have
to
to
make that goal.
understand-
no,
That's-
Richard's like, I'm not taking in all these credit applications because they'll just want me to do more.
Yeah.
And that's why we often, you'll find as we do this, we parallel the world system to Egypt. Because it is all about...
It's the same system.
It's the same system. It's all about the drive, the money, the dollar.
Yep. Verse 9. Let heavier work be laid on the men, that they may labor in it and pay no regard to lying words. So the taskmasters and the foremen of the people went out and said to the people, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. This is interesting. Let heavier work be laid on the men, that they may labor at it and pay no attention, pay no regard to lying words. So he's like, Moses is lying. God's not saving them. Don't pay attention to his words. Go work harder. That way you'll forget what Moses said. Verse 11.
Parallel to now.
All right.
Don't listen to Moses.
Yeah, we're going to... Oh, yeah.
Expect kickback.
Go and get your straw yourselves wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced in the least. So the people were scattered throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. So here we see again, they're being scattered. We know what happens to Israel later. They get scattered after they get into the promised land. So such a picture type here. They were in Goshen, choice land, the best land, the promised land, so to speak. Then they get scattered because of their poor choices. The taskmasters were urgent, saying, complete your work, your daily task each day, and as when there was straw. And the foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, why have you not done all your tasks of making bricks today and yesterday as in the past? So, the foremen, what happened to the foremen? They got beaten. Were these foremen Egyptians?
No.
These were Hebrews.
Yes.
Right? So now the Hebrews are going back to them and yelling at them, why have you not done all your task of making bricks today and yesterday as in the past? He's using the people to control the people.
Oh my gosh.
Enough
You
said.
don't see that right
Do we? I mean, come on.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
That if this isn't a picture type of the world right now,
Yep.
come on. Then the foremen of the people of Israel came and cried to Pharaoh, why do you treat your servants like this? No straw is given to your servants, yet they say to us, make bricks. And behold, your servants are beaten. But the fault is in your own people. A little bit of civil unrest happening right now. But he said, "You're idle. You're lazy. That is why you say, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' Go now and work. No straw will be given you, but you must still deliver the same number of bricks." The foreman of the people of Israel saw that they were in trouble when they said, you shall by no means reduce your number of bricks, your daily task each day." They met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them as they came out from Pharaoh. This doesn't look like it's going to be good. And they said to them, "The Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Now we see people turning their backs toward the truth. Moses represents the truth. Moses is their deliverer. Moses is what eventually is going to bring them out. He is the truth. He has heard from Yah. He's coming into them to deliver them. He is truth. And what are they doing? Because of the pressure of Egypt, they're turning their back on the truth. Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me?" He's still on this kick. Not me.
It kind of reminded me of Jacob.
Yes. "For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all." And that ends chapter 5, but the portion ends in the next verse. And this is the key verse, and this is the cliffhanger for the evening. "But the Lord said to Moses, 'Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will,'" what? "Send." Not let them go. He will send them out, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land.
He being
Pharaoh. Any questions on chapter 5 and 6:1?
I love Exodus.
It's my favorite book.
Yeah.
Favorite.
Yeah. Favorite book.
Favorite book. All right, let's talk about the application. I mean, we can spend all night talking about applying this to our lives. But first off, are you becoming settled? We talked about this a little bit last week, but again, we see this idea of they settled, they mixed in with the land. Are you becoming settled? Or are you being set apart? Are you holy?
Yes.
And it made me think of this. The Shema, the hear and obey. Yah called out to Moses from the bush. He turned, and then Yah called out to him. So are we ready to hear and obey? Are we ready to Shema? Submit to the authority over you. The word tells us to submit to the authority, whether they're good or bad, because it's in the sight of the Lord. Do everything unto the Lord. Do everything unto Yah. You know, we see in this story that we need to be able to endure the trials and look towards our deliverance. And I think we kind of went over this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about, like, when we go through things, look at your own life first and say, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? And if you can say, yes, I'm following the Lord, I'm obeying His word, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and I'm still in the midst of heartache, I'm still in the midst of trials, I'm still in the midst of troubles, look for His divine intervention and look towards your deliverance. And when I thought about Moses, this came to my mind. When truth shows up, don't reject it just because it doesn't look like you thought it would look like. Moses came and was their deliverer, but it didn't come in the package that they thought it was going to come in. And they rejected him because things got harder. They didn't have the insight and the foresight to be able to look out and say, all right, where's God's divine intervention in this? Let me look towards my deliverance.
Well, it's all about like Jesus.
Yeah. And then, of course, the last, sit back and see the wonders of Yah. That's all they needed to do. Look to Moses, focus on the truth, and sit back and wait on Yah's wonders. And wait on their deliverance. And that is Torah portion Shemot. Any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms?